I'm with Donald Gutstein, author of Not a Conspiracy Theory from Key Porter Books, and we're talking about Canadian media. Well, what influence do you think the Fraser Institute has had on the Canadian media?
I think they've had enormous influence, both directly and indirectly. The whole purpose of corporate propaganda is to reach target audiences, and the only way they can do that is through the media. And take the school rankings, for instance, which has become a very important program for the Institute in undermining public support for public education. What they do is when they determine which schools in which communities top the list, they create news releases designed just for those communities. And so that's just an example. They have a very sophisticated marketing and public relations department that makes sure they get maximum mileage out of all of their reports and studies. But more than that, when Conrad Black was owned the Hollinger newspapers, he reached into the Fraser Institute for a number of editorial writers like Danielle Smith, who came to the Calgary Herald, Fazil Millar, who was the Fraser Institute's director of deregulation. He became editorial page editor of the Vancouver Sun. And Bill Robson, the one who's at the Ottawa Citizen, he also came from the Fraser Institute. Wow. So they have the connections, and then there's a whole network of neoliberal, libertarian columnists like Lauren Gunter, and they all network at the Civitas annual conventions. Gunter is Michael Walker is a founder of Civitas, and Gunter is a past president. So they have a lot of influence directly and indirectly, but also just their persistence in getting their message out year after year. As I was saying, repetition is a crucial strategy that they use. That the first couple of years, the media are very suspicious of what they're doing. But by year 3 or 4 or 5, it becomes part of the background of ideas that are just floating around, and they're more likely to be accepted and to be treated seriously. And that's certainly what's happened with a lot of the programs, and especially the school report cards.
Yes, and you say that this has pushed the whole public discourse to the right? Well,
if you look over the 40-year period, 35-year period that the Fraser Institute has been operating, and not just them, there's C.D. Howe and the other regional think tanks that were set up by business in Canada during the 1990s, they've been enormously successful in turning people against government and supporting the vast disparities that have appeared in Canadian and American society. I think what's happened in Canada, to a large part, you can credit the Fraser Institute for cutting taxes, cutting government programs, letting business to do what it wants to. That has undermined our kind of social justice views, our equal opportunity, the kinds of values Canadians used to take for granted. Those seem to be vanishing.
They're certainly threatened. And where does the Fraser Institute get its funding, and how much funding does it get?
Well, it's up to in 2008, which is the last year I've looked at. It was $14 million. That's a huge amount of money. About $4 million comes from the Weston Foundation, Bob Laws and George Weston Company, the third wealthiest family in Canada. They're supporting all these school choice. They have a voucher program. They give awards for schools that perform the best on the rankings. So that makes up about $4 million. A lot comes from, well, I know about $300,000 that comes from the Lilly Foundation in the U.S. You look at the trustees of the organization, and that's why the trustees are there, because they fund the organization. So like Gwyn Morgan, a former CEO of Encana, who's a Fraser Institute vice chairman, I believe has been a staunch supporter and funder for many years, although it's pretty difficult to track that down.
Okay.
Just one other thing, the Fraser Institute held their 35th anniversary celebration here in Calgary. Why is that, even though they're based in Vancouver? It's because this is where the funders are, right? So they came here. And there was also a celebration, one in Vancouver, one in Montreal, and one in Toronto, but this was the big one here in Calgary.
Does that mean there's a connection with the government?
I don't know today, but I do know, like from the past, in my book, I showed the connection between the Fraser Institute and the Bill Bennett government in British Columbia in the 80s, and the Grant Devine government in Saskatchewan in the late 80s, and then the Ralph Klein government in the early 90s, how the Fraser Institute provided advice on how to cut programs and services, how to privatize government enterprises. But as to what they're doing today, I don't really know.
Okay, thank you.